guys. My name is Daria, and I'm going to be giving you a brief look into Raphael, the painter. For an extended period of his time, he lived in Rome, and he painted quite a number of things that we still know today. Many of you may not know him right off the bat, but as we go through this power slide, you'll be able to definitely distinguish his artwork. Let's get looking. Raphael Sanzio, and I'm sorry, not very good at pronouncing the last part. He was an Italian painter and architect, and he was revered during his time, which was the High Renaissance period. His birthday was said to be April 6 in 1483, although some people also say that it was mid-March. But most stories say that it is April 6 because he happened to have died on April 6 as well, in 1520, which leads to a far more interesting story if you die on your birthday. He originated from Urbino, Italy, and was later taken from the earth in Rome, which soon became his hometown. Throughout his life, he was actually nicknamed the Prince of Painters, and Pope Julius II hired him as chief architect 6 years before his death, and he was not the only pope to revere him in his artistic format, but we will find that out later as well. Raphael's father, Giovanni, was a painter for the Duke of Urbino from the beginnings of Raphael's life. In these crucial years, father taught son the basic skills of his craft, all the while filling his name and his mind with humanistic philosophies, creating a boy both mentally and artistically capable of handling anything that would come their way in the future. This proved to be necessary in 1494 because Giovanni passed away, leaving an 11-year-old Raphael to fend for himself and his stepmother. And I did try, but I could not find anything on his actual mother. My research may not have been good enough, but the only thing I can really gather from that is she most likely died either when he was young or from childbirth itself. With his father's legacy to uphold, young Raphael began the daunting task of managing his father's workshop, but this ended up bearing quite a bit of fruit from his labor, because he surpassed his father's own skill and became one of the finest painters in his town. And I chose to do this picture in the background because it actually has an interesting little tidbit. This is supposed to be a portrait of a wealthy lord or duke or some person like that. I forget his name now, but what I found was interesting was many people believe that it was actually a secret self-portrait he did of himself, because he was said to be a very handsome, very lithe young man. So, take your pick. These were some of his first paintings from 1504 to 1506. They were the George fighting the dragons. The one on the left was finished in 1505, and the one on the right actually took from 1504 to 1506. But in the 1500s, Raphael was actually enlisted as the famous painter Pietro Vannucci's apprentice. This apprenticeship lasted for 4 years in Perugui. We're going to assume I said it right the first time. And he gave Raphael the hands-on experience he needed, and he was the first person to kind of teach him different artistic skills besides his father. And during this time, he practiced the styles and techniques of what we now call the High Renaissance. And this is one of the pictures that he painted during this apprenticeship and during this time period. There was also the Marriage of the Virgin, which was also created more towards this time. And it's a very moving piece, I would say. And then the techniques of the High Renaissance, in case you were unaware, was the classical element, the religious themes, the realistic figures that often had intricate landscapes, although they didn't necessarily have to. They also had compositional order, stability, and complexities of light and shadow. And we chose this picture of the Pope on the right because it does show many of these same qualities. It does have that classical feel. It is religious because it is a painting of the Pope. It is himself, which is a realistic figure. The landscape is not that intricate, but he did not just leave it black. You can see the three-dimensional world in the back that he tried so hard to achieve. and I think it's a very well-rounded, balanced example of the High Renaissance painting in which he prided himself in. The Madonnas are also some of his most popular pieces. He actually created 27 of them, but for the sake of a timely slideshow, I'm only going to show you about 6. But you can definitely see the progression of his art style through the years. These start from the first ones that he created until we get about here, which is the middle, and then the last one that he painted. And it kind of shows the progression of his creative growth and his artistic flair. And I also have another really annoying little fun fact, but this one has nothing to do with Raphael in general. My family actually owns the last Madonna that he ever painted, and growing up as a child, I was told that I painted it out of purely sarcastic and humorous reasons, but for about 5 years of my life, I thought that I was an amazing painter. Little did I know that it was just a print that we bought from the store that I enjoyed looking at quite honestly for every single moment of the day. Did not necessarily need to know that, but it's okay. This is a learning process. In the year 1508, Raphael was given his next golden ticket because Pope Julius II commissioned him to paint a room in the Vatican. And this is actually a very high honor for anybody living back in this day. He picked up his belongings and moved to Rome almost instantaneously, where he spent the next 4 years painting that single room. Upon the completion, the Pope assigned him another room, but this Pope died in 1513 before that rooms were completed. But Leo X, which was Julius's successor, kept Raphael to not only finish the second room, but to paint a third room as well. And then during the end of this room, his fame became so wide that he had his assistants complete these rooms while he finished his own pieces of. The School of Athens was probably the most famous painting he created for Pope Julius II. And something else that I found interesting was while this was the School of Athens, and these were supposed to be the great thinkers of back in the day, he actually used people in his time period to portray them. I've heard that Aristotle is supposed to be a depiction of Michelangelo and other interesting things like that. And he's also supposed to have a self-portrait of himself amidst the crowd peeking through, trying to learn all that he can. And I find that very interesting. This is a picture of one of the rooms that he painted as well, and it's beautiful to say the least. And in my research, I found out that he actually completed around 14 rooms in total, whether or not they were all in, whether they were all him being hired by the Pope or they were from other people as well. It's a great feat to say that you've created beauty in 14 different rooms just as extravagant as this one is. During his life period, he was also an architect and a drawer, not just a painter. And while Raphael was at work on the Stanza della Signatura, that sounds right, which were the rooms he painted for the Pope, he also began to dabble in architecture. He designed the church of this one. I'm sorry, can't even attempt it. A banker also commissioned him to create his funeral chapel in the church of Santa Maria del Popolo. Popolo? Probably. In 1514, the Pope Leo X hired him along with Bramante to work on the Basilica of St. Peter's. But this is apparently one of the hallways that he helped design. Raphael's architecture in general was influenced by the historic Pantheon, which you can definitely see in this piece. He was actively engaging the specters, and that's one of the things that really puts him apart from other architects. He made a memorial chapel, which is shown here, and you can definitely see the domes and drums with pendatives and crossing points. He used different marbles that were both light and dark, with oriental granites, bronze, and mosaics that were not only inside but also outside of the domes. Raphael also attempted to dabble in sculptures, although I could not find very many that he made himself. But he was a student of ancient Greco-Roman sculpturing, and in 1515 Pope Leo X placed Raphael in charge of the preservation of the marble holding irreplaceable Latin inscriptions. And with a few years of diligent efforts, it granted him the title of Commissioner of Antiquities for the city. So while he didn't necessarily make that many sculptures himself that were revered, he was in charge of taking care of them and making sure that they were preserved and their beauty stayed for potentially the rest of time. By this time in his life, he had been placed in charge of almost all of the papacy's art projects in Rome, so he dabbled in architecture. He was in painting and decoratings of rooms and burial chambers and churches, and he was also the preserver of antiquities, so he had quite an important job. Raphael also had a love life. The painter lived in Palazzo Caprini in the Borgo, which was a very nice palace. He never married, though he was engaged in 1514 to young Miss Maria. This is actually a painting of her in the background. His utter lack of enthusiasm, however, was evident when the marriage was never finalized, never went through with, and she passed away in 1520. He was said to have many lovers, however, and he also had one favorite, which was Margherita Luti, which was the daughter of a local baker. And this is actually a photo of her, right? Well, not a photo. It's actually a portrait of her that he did as well. And he was said to have many affairs, but she was the constant in his life. There are, however, many speculations on how he died. Some of them are quite ridiculous, but so many different sites and so many different researches that I did had so many different answers for it, I just decided to give you some of my favorites. Most of them say that it was sudden and unexpected. One of the most interesting was there was a rumor that, according to Vasari, Raphael had had a long night of heavy lovemaking with Miss Margherita, and after which he got a fever and was prescribed the wrong medicine to the doctors because he did not tell them how he contracted the fever, and he was killed 12 days later, but he was able to sign all of his wills and giving everything away, which sounds pretty far-fetched. There are also some sites that claim Raphael died from a fever he contracted at the age of 38 by an insect bite. This one's a little more believable, and you would wonder why you wouldn't survive an insect bite, but back in the day, doctors usually prescribed you with bleeding with leeches, which would not have helped but hindered the healing process itself. Transfiguration of Christ was the final and unfinished work in Raphael's life. During the last 2 years, I believe it took, before he died, he painted the last Madonna and this one. He connected the story of Christ ascending the mountain of Revelation and the healing of the lunatic boy. And speculators say that his apprentices and his students actually finished the painting for him after his death. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I hope you didn't mind my rambling too much. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope you found all the Easter eggs of Raphael the turtle.